Welcome to Front Row with Coronation. This is the first in a brand new series that we have designed to give you, our clients, key insights to help you along your own personal investment journey. You'll also learn more about how we manage your hard-earned savings. The last 20 months have been tough. Part of our reason for creating Front Row is to be able to connect with you more directly. As humans, we have certainly learned firsthand just how important that is over this challenging time. We look forward to sharing the journey with you over the series, so stay with us. We have lots to talk about. In each episode, we will share useful financial planning tips that will empower you to make fruitful investment decisions. We will also cover key investment and market-related events. Today, we will talk about the powerful benefits of investing tax-free. You will also get deeper insights into one of the largest stocks on the JSE, Naspers. And we'll share with you a community initiative that is close to our hearts, and we'll hear from the MD of the organization. To kick off our first episode, I'm speaking to Peter Kukumur, who is the head of the personal investments business at Coronation. Welcome, Peter. As a starting point, perhaps it would be useful to take a step back and tell our audience a little bit more about Coronation. What does Coronation believe in? And more importantly, how do those beliefs shape the decisions that we make on behalf of our clients?
Thanks, Samika. Coronation has only one business, and that is to focus on running the now 600 odd billion rand that we manage on behalf of you, our client, as well as we possibly can. This singular focus keeps things very simple. I mean, it really is the compass that drives how we make business decisions. And a few years ago, what we tried to do was to codify the way that we think about our business into something called the Coronation Client Charter. This is a 4-point statement that is aimed at conveying the commitment that we make as a business to those investors, to your clients that have entrusted their hard-earned assets to us. And if we quickly talk through the Client Charter, its first point is to strive to always put our clients first. I mean, so as I said before, that drives the decision making. It prioritizes where we deploy resources. It's all about ensuring that we only focus on activity that will produce better investment returns for our investors or that will improve the level of service that we can provide to you. The second bullet point is that we have an unwavering commitment to the long term. We firmly believe that investors are better served if they can be patient, if they can commit to the long term, because it means compound growth can work for them. Our investment strategy is more reliable over long periods of time. They'll get better outcomes if they invest for long periods of time. But likewise, we have to commit to think as long term in how we manage the business and in the decisions that we make. It's not about this year or next, it's about the next decade or two. Next point in the Client Charter is a focus on producing top performance over meaningful periods. And really, we're active managers. I mean, that is unambiguously what we do. That means that over the investment horizon, as specified, or longer periods of time, investors should expect to outperform the market indices, to outperform similar funds offered by other asset managers, because that's our core value add. And then finally, because we fully understand that this is a business where we are responsible for your money, we need to be uncompromising about ethics. And we need to remind ourselves and every member of our team every day when we start our day jobs that we can only deserve your trust if we continue to earn it.
Thank you, Peter. I think our viewers now have a much better understanding of why our company's slogan is Trust is Earned. Moving on to the show itself, I'd like for you to please share your thoughts on Front Row. What inspired a show like this?
We're quite excited about Front Row. So we have been thinking a lot about how do we take all this investment and report back content that we generate, through things like fund commentaries, the correspondent, our quarterly magazine, through regular articles that we publish on our website or that appear in the press. So there's a lot of content that we generate. And we've been trying to find a way to package the headlines out of all of this into a different medium, make it more accessible to clients. So as you said in the intro, it's about sharing this information through a new and hopefully slightly more exciting medium. But Over and above that, there's another point that's really important. To try and live up to that values that we express in the client charter, we think this is another mechanism that we can use to ensure that our team remains accountable to you as our investor base.
Peter, I'm sure you will agree that when it comes to the investment universe, that it can often come across as quite intimidating and overwhelming for investors. How does one navigate the choice that they have and decide what the best investment or solution is for one's personal circumstances? If you look at the Coronation fund range, we also have an extensive list of funds that one can choose from.
That's a very good question. It can seem very daunting and it can look like things are super complicated. There's so many different investment options that you can make use of. Just in our local unit trust range, we have 23 funds. So where do you start? And I think the first thing that you have to get right as an investor is to have great clarity about what your need is as an investor. And there really are only three key need categories. The first one is investors requiring long-term investment growth. You've got a decade or multiple decades of time to invest. And because of that, you have the ability to take a bit more risk in the pursuit of earning a higher rate of return. At the other end of the spectrum, you can be an immediate income investor. And immediate income investors don't have as much time. They invest for maybe 3 years, maximum 5 years. Very concerned about near-term capital stability. You don't want to lose money when markets go down. Often you want to take an income out of your portfolio over a short period of time. So these are more conservative investors. You will invest very differently to long-term growth-oriented investors. And then the third need is the investors who need a bit of both. So these are typically investors requiring to draw on income from their portfolio over long periods of time, such as retirees. And these investors need to balance this need for immediate income, i.e. the need to have a more stable portfolio with the need to still have decent long-term growth because that income needs to last and pay expenses over several years to come. So those are the three key needs. You can add a fourth dimension to that, and that is international diversification. So whether you are a very conservative immediate income investor or a more relaxed about immediate risk long-term growth investor, for many South Africans, it's very important to diversify internationally. If you're watching this program, you're probably living and working in South Africa, which means you already have a lot of country exposure. We're a small emerging market. There are many other opportunities in the rest of the world. So some investors would want to replicate one of those three needs, but in a global-only portfolio.
So investor need seems like, or identifying the investor need seems like it's only one part of the puzzle being solved for. Taking it a step further, how does one actually decide which portfolio, what fund is the right one to match that investor need, and what does Coronation offer in that space?
No, you are right. I mean, it's understanding your need is a filter. It's a starting point. It's not the whole story. I think the next big point an investor need to get their head around is, do you want to be very involved in your investment, or do you want it to just happen? Do you want somebody else to just take responsibility for the outcome, for the eventual meeting of your objective? And that's where most investors end up. Life happens, we're all busy, we all have lots of things that is demanding of our attention. So that means that more investors find themselves in that I don't want to be too involved, I want somebody to make decisions on my behalf category. And that's really the next important bit to introduce. And that is that you have two main types of funds. You have more solutions-oriented multi-asset class portfolios that are a very good way to implement that need of having your investment manager make more decisions on your behalf. And then you have asset class specific or building block or thematic funds for investors that want to be more hands-on and that are looking for effectively a build your own solution, but then just use an element from the fund range that we provide.
When you say multi-asset class fund, maybe you can break that down a little so our viewers understand what you mean by a multi-asset portfolio versus a building block fund.
Okay, yeah, that's also super relevant. Multi-asset class portfolios can invest across a wide variety of the different asset classes that are available. So you'll have some global assets, you'll have some domestic assets, you will have equities, you will have the income assets such as bonds, you may have other growth assets, and it blends it together into a portfolio that is consistent with a specific investor need. So if you look at our South African fund range, for example, for the immediate income need, we have a fund called Strategic Income that will allocate across the yielding asset classes that will aim to give you a return of what you can get from a bank deposit or cash, plus around 2% per year. So that's a solution packaged out of everything that's available for immediate income investors. For long-term growth investors, we would have Balance Plus and Market Plus, trying to do basically the same job. The key difference between Balance Plus and Market Plus is Balance Plus has a little bit more restriction because that's what's required for retirement investors. Market Plus, a little bit less restriction, so for investors outside of the retirement system. And then in the middle, we have Coronation Capital Plus and Balanced Defensive. These are portfolios that are both suitable for requiring an immediate income, but also have enough growth assets such as equities to give you good prospects of preserving your capital over the next 10, 20, 30 years, however long you may need to take an income. So that's really what multi-asset class portfolios do. You can contrast that with an asset class specific fund such as our top 20 fund. That top 20, as its name implies, that will be the best investment ideas selected from the JSE, but that is purely a South African equity portfolio. So if you want international diversification, if you think the market is too expensive and you want to reduce exposure, you would have to do that yourself in a building block fund such as top 20, whereas in a multi-asset class fund such as Market Plus, we will take that responsibility.
You mentioned the fourth investor need being one of offshore diversification. If one of our investors wanted to make the call to invest offshore, is it the same process in terms of identifying funds to meet a specific objective?
Yes, it would work in exactly the same way because it's still important to understand your need, your time horizon, exactly. So why am I making this investment? What am I expecting from it? But we would then have a very similar range of multi-asset class portfolios, both available in rands or in dollars for investors across that need space. So from a global strategic income fund to a global version of Capital Plus, a fund called Global Managed in the middle of the risk spectrum, to a higher risk multi-asset fund in the form of Global Optimum Growth, but basically doing the same jobs as the multi-asset class funds in the domestic range.
So Peter, that takes care of investor need and fund selection and what an appropriate portfolio is to match that need. But investors often come across terms like product, endowment, retirement annuities. How do those fit into the overall picture?
Okay, that's important to touch on briefly as well. I think the key point to make is that most of these product structures exist for some kind of regulatory or tax reason. So the basic building block of the investment industry is a fund that we've covered in the previous section. Sometimes it's called a unit trust or a collective investment scheme, but that's the investment engine. So it's a very efficient way to package investment portfolios. It's arguably the most efficient way available to do so in the South African context. That's why it's by far the most popular implementation mechanism. You can invest in the fund directly, but you can also take this fund and then you can wrap it in a product structure. So you can use an endowment or a tax-free investment structure, and that is just a holding structure to hold your fund through. That will give you some tax benefits. Or you can invest in the retirement system. So whether you are in a retirement fund through your employment or you decide to buy one yourself in the form of a retirement annuity, you will then be in a specific part of the system. So you get tax breaks in the retirement system in exchange for some limitations in how you can use the money. And that may, at some points in your life cycle or your journey as an investor, may take you to a point where you become what in the jargon is called a compulsory investor. And for instance, when you resign from an employer and you now have a retirement benefit, if you want to preserve the tax benefit, you can do it through a preservation fund. If you get to retirement, you can buy a retirement income that is now compulsory income that you have to buy with 2/3 of your capital through a living annuity. So the product structures, I think, are the least important part. It's much more important to understand what your need is and to then find an appropriate fund for that need. You can then enhance the outcomes through investing in a more tax-efficient vehicle if that is applicable.
Thank you, Peter. If that sounds like too much to digest, don't worry. We will unpack the various funds and products in more detail in future episodes of the show. This time, however, we will be focusing on how best to use a tax-free investment. Thank you, Peter, for joining us and for your valuable insights.
Thanks, Amika, and to all the viewers, I really hope you enjoy Front Row. I'm excited about this journey.
So, today we are focusing on tax-free investing, something that should be on everyone's radar. I have invited Naledi Makiwane, an investment specialist here at Coronation, to demonstrate to us just why a tax-free investment is a no-brainer. Naledi, a tax-free investment sounds almost too good to be true. Investors never have to worry about income tax, dividends tax, or even capital gains tax. If this is the case, surely everyone should have one.
Yes, so not everyone actually knows about this perk that government gives us where we're able to invest tax-free. So what a tax-free investment is it's a vehicle in which we're allowed to contribute 36,000 rands per year up to a lifetime limit of 500,000 rands. In your tax-free investment, you pay no income, dividend or capital gains tax on your investment gains, which then boosts your realized return over time. When you invest directly into a unit trust, you're subject to all three forms of tax. But choosing the exact same unit trust within that tax-free investment then means that those tax effects are removed. So I think this is best illustrated by using an example. Okay, so I'm going to be comparing the tax-free investment to a normal unit trust investment that is subject to tax. And this is really what highlights the benefits of tax-free investing over time. So we take a look at Andile, whose parents started a tax-free savings investment for him at birth and contributed the maximum amount of 36,000 rands per year until the lifetime limit of 500,000 rand is reached at around the age of 13. If you look at the graphs that are on the screen currently, you can see the assumptions that we've made for this particular example. If Andile keeps that amount until age 18, the value of his tax-free investment is over 1 million rand. And this is the value in today's terms as we have adjusted for inflation. When you compare that to the direct unit trust investment at a value of about 883,000, you get to see that the difference between the two amounts is about 22%.
So with that kind of money, he could comfortably fund his tertiary education. But what does it look like if he chooses to keep the investment and remain in his tax-free investment?
So whenever you're investing, right, you get to really see the long-term effects of compounding when you keep that money invested. So let's say, Andile at the age of 18, he decides not to actually cash his investment in, and he decides that he wants to keep it for longer until, say, the age of 30. At that point, the value of the tax-free investment is about 2.2 million rands, and that's about 42% higher than the value of the direct unit trust investment. And that actually makes quite a significant difference in terms of certain decisions like buying property. He could buy an apartment or can actually afford a standalone house with the extra amount that he has in the tax-free investment. However, again, if he keeps it for longer, then the more he actually benefits. So let's say then Andile decides to keep this investment until the age of 65, at which point he's considering retirement, right, or has to retire. If you look at the tax-free investment, it's over 17 million rands. And that's more than double what the value of the taxable investment is at that point. This is a significant difference when you start to compare the quality of retirement that Andile gets to enjoy, at those very different amounts.
Wow, that really is a significantly better return over time.
That's exactly why we encourage you to build up towards your lifetime tax-free allowance, a limit of 500,000 rands as early as possible, and then to keep that investment for as long as possible in order for you to build up that healthy nest egg that's really benefited from the untaxed returns.
So if you have extra money outside of your retirement fund to invest for yourself or for your children, what you're saying is you should first consider taking advantage of your annual tax-free allowance.
That's right. But remember that when you invest tax-free, you can withdraw your money at any point in time, but you actually can't put it back. So all amounts invested count towards your annual and lifetime tax-free limits, regardless of any withdrawals that you make. In other words, you can't replace the money you withdraw with a new investment. So we encourage you to start building up to that lifetime limit as early as possible to maximize the time it has to benefit from compound interest. We also know that investing over multiple decades and leaving your money invested also enables it to withstand the effects of short-term market volatility, and that's quite typical of financial markets. So over the long term, the bumps smooth out, and the overall trend is for your money to grow.
So start as early as possible and keep it in the investment for as long as possible, right?
Exactly. And then also remember that the current tax year ends on the 28th of February 2022. So you still have time to ensure that you take full advantage of your tax-free allowance. To do so, speak to your financial advisor or go to our website to find out more.
Thank you, Naledi, for your valuable time and also for taking us through the dynamics of a tax-free investment. Up next, we are going to cover one of the most topical companies in the SA equity market, Naspers. This is a business that has roots in South Africa, but has grown to be a dominant force on a global scale as well. Here to delve deeper into this business and give you a better understanding of the company and its prospects is the analyst on the stock and portfolio manager at Coronation, Mark Talpert.
I think it will be hard to find any South African saver that is not aware of Naspers. Before I carry on, I just want to make the note that I'm going to be referring to Prosus as opposed to Naspers. The two are largely interchangeable, with Prosus listing in 2019 and the underlying asset exposure being the same. Naspers has gone up 9 times over the last decade. And when you compare that to the JSE only going up 1.7 times over the same time period, it becomes very evident how important this asset was and how impactful it was to overall savings for the South African investor. The burning question on everyone's lips today is, will this feat be repeated in the decade ahead of us? When you look at the business of Naspers, it has 2 elements to it. It's got its shareholding in Tencent, and then it's got its non-Tencent assets. Prosus owns 29% of Tencent, which equates to 140% of its current market capitalization. And that's before you even consider the fact that the non-Tencent assets are valued, in our view, at around $60 billion, which is another 35% of its market cap. We feel that there's layers of valuation support in the investment case. You cannot talk about Tencent today without mentioning the regulatory environment that's at play. Something very important to note with Tencent is the amount of restraint that they've exhibited over the years. And they've always had something core within their DNA, being that they would like to always follow the spirit of the law as opposed to just the letter of the law. This has positioned them on a relative basis much better than a lot of other Chinese internet companies that are having to rework their business in a material sense, versus Tencent not being immune to the regulatory environment, but having less impact on their business versus some of their peers who maybe haven't exhibited as much restraint. Then when you consider Tencent, it is not just a gaming business like it grew up in its early days. It's a business that now diversified across numerous segments to cover gaming, advertising, fintech, and more recently cloud. And then what they've done incredibly well over the years is also build up an investment portfolio which then provides further diversification. That's an investment portfolio that now has a $220 billion valuation, which represents just under 40% of Tencent's market cap. So within the gaming business, Tencent historically grew a domestic gaming business, but now has a global gaming business that spans some iconic assets. Riot Games, the maker of League of Legends, Supercell, the maker of Clash of Clans, and a minority shareholding in Epic Games, the maker of the iconic Fortnite. This allows them ultimately to have a far bigger addressable market, because you're not just now addressing the domestic gaming market, but the global gaming market. And when you consider that the Chinese gaming market is only 1/4 of the total gaming market, this gives them a far, far bigger scope to have growth within that business and should expand on that growth duration. Then you have an advertising business. And Tencent is a business that's incredibly iconic in that you'll find it very hard to meet any Chinese consumer that does not interact with one of Tencent's products on a daily basis. They ultimately represent 36% of total internet time spent, and with that only have 11% advertising market share. Then you have the fintech business, which has grown up over the years and has become an iconic payment business, But more than just the payment business, it now also expands into wealth management, insurance, and credit. Then finally, you have a cloud business that has absolute decades of growth ahead of it, in the sense that the transition to cloud in China is probably 10 to 15 years behind where we are in the West. And this is the top priority of investment for Tencent and should be a further growth driver of their business. Then let's move on to the non-Tencent assets. Within that, you have a vast array of a well-diversified technology portfolio spanning classifieds, food delivery, payment and fintech, and education technology. In the classifieds business, it's a business that has grown up over the past decade, has been built via M&A and organically, and now represents some dominant assets in regions such Russia and Eastern Europe and Brazil. Then you have food delivery, and it's a food delivery business that is primarily made up of three assets, being Delivery Hero, Our Food, and Swiggy. Delivery Hero is a dominant food delivery business that operates across 52 markets, with then having a number one position in 90% of these markets. You then have Our Food that operates in Brazil and has 80% market share. Then finally, you have Swiggy, which operates in India, one of the most attractive markets with the lowest penetration of food delivery in the world, and operates in a duopoly with Zomato. Then you have the payment and fintech segment. Within that, they've built up a business there that operates across the globe, but most notably in India. India is a region that has absolute decades of growth ahead of it in payments, based on the fact that the amount of non-cash transactions that happen in that economy today is still a fraction of Western peers. And that's a business that's been built and effectively services merchants today and allowing them to accept digital payments. But by then leveraging that relationship you have, you can build on and create a business that spans far more than just payments, but into other products such as lending, wealth management, and insurance. Then finally, the last emerging vertical that they have is education technology. That is a vertical that is becoming more and more prominent as the world becomes a fast-moving place that requires continual learning. And it's a business that has a collection of assets that reach 90% of Fortune 500 companies, allowing them an unrivaled reach into enterprises across the globe, offering various continual learning products. And it's a business that should exhibit extreme growth in terms of the penetration of enterprise education being today only a fraction of what it should become into the future. So the burning question is, will history repeat itself? We think Naspers and Prosus is worth more than double its current market value. And because of that, is one of the most attractive global opportunities out there. And therefore, it is represented across numerous portfolios within Coronation.
Thank you, Mark. Beyond managing your hard-earned savings, at Coronation, we are also committed to uplifting and investing in our country and its people for the long term. More than 30 million South Africans are food insecure, all while a third of all food produced in our nation is wasted. In response, we have partnered with Food Forward SA, the country's largest food security organization. Over the past 2 years, Coronation has donated over 3 million rand to this initiative. We are fortunate to have their MD, Andy du Plessis, here with us to tell us about the difference they are making in our country.
Thanks, Amika. At Food Forward SA, we are here to solve a real problem in South Africa, food insecurity. Partnerships with companies such as Coronation are vital to enable us to make a national impact. The company's contribution since the start of COVID-19 has helped us to make meals available to over 700,000 people daily at a cost of just 85 cents per meal. And we are able to keep our costs low as we source surplus food and only pay for the logistical costs of distribution. With our partnership with Coronation, we can rapidly scale up to alleviate hunger through our recently launched Household Food Security Program. The program delivers nutritious food parcels every month to vulnerable households across South Africa. In October, we celebrated World Food Day, and Coronation was there to help at one of our warehouses. It was fantastic to see just how many Coronation people were there on the ground helping us pack meals for the most vulnerable, even the chairperson. And we would like to say a heartfelt thank you to Coronation for the immense contribution and support. If you'd like to learn more about the work at Food Forward SA, or you'd like to get involved in some way, please feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for joining us in the first episode of Front Row with Coronation. To make this series the best we can for you, we'd love your honest feedback on today's show and what you'd like us to cover in future episodes. If you suggest an idea or pose a question that we can include in our next episode, we'll top up your account with 10,000 Rand. So let us know your thoughts in the feedback section below. And we look forward to seeing you again in the front row.